Welcome.
Welcome.
Hey guys, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are
And
you?
wherever you may be, I think you're at the conference.
No, we are not. We're in Los Angeles. We're in Hollywood,
Okay.
the future of media.
Yeah,
Good
we're
morning.
bringing
Good
media
morning.
back to
Yes.
Hollywood.
But thanks so much for joining. Would you mind kicking us off with just a little bit of an introduction and how are you spending your day to day these days?
Oh my gosh, a little bit of an introduction. Well, my name's Katie Haun. I founded Haun Ventures, which is we're investing in blockchain technology through an early stage fund and a later stage fund. And we're about 3.5 years old as a company and as a fund.
Do you do
And
liquids or
How
all?
many
or
how
all
many decades
companies?
has the last 3.5 years felt
oh
like?
my
to
gosh.
you?
Well, you know
That's a
what,
good
guys?
question.
I've actually been in this space over a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Over a decade. So how many years has that felt like?
Yeah.
But the last 3 years have been wild. But I'm really excited. You asked about how I'm spending my days. I'm really excited about this particular moment in crypto
Sure.
because we have a lot of the fundamentals coming together. And as I said, I've been in the space a long time, and we've had different fundamentals working at different points. But it finally feels like all these fundamentals are working all at once. And
break down those fundamentals. I
Yeah.
imagine it's regulatory, it's community, it's
It's
collective
like scale
belief,
of the actual
scale,
chains, maturity
but
of the code.
how do you think about it?
What are you thinking about?
well, you guys do it. I can question you. Great job. No, so the first thing is institutions, like you said.
Okay.
Institutions. The institutional story has been around before in crypto in different cycles. And we had some early adopters for institutions, right? We had Fidelity. If you think about folks like Abby
Yeah,
Johnson, she's
that's
been in the
right.
space for as long as I have, maybe even longer. We had folks like Meta. I mean, I was on Zuck's original
Yeah.
DM project board.
Wow.
He saw stablecoins coming years ago. So we had Meta leaned in as an institution kind of early. And then we had other institutions, folks like BlackRock. I think Larry Fink is actually a great exhibit A for someone who really changed their mind on crypto.
Totally.
Larry was against crypto, not against, but he was certainly not a fan of blockchain technology. And a few years ago, he said he had really changed his mind. And now you have BlackRock running a tokenized money market fund called Biddle. So that's some of the earlier institutional adopters. But now we have some of the later institutional adopters, folks like JP Morgan, Charles Schwab, and others. And you'll see other announcements coming out soon from other institutions. So the institutional story is one fundamental, but I want to talk about three others.
Please.
You mentioned one, regulatory, but before I get to regulatory, because it's not the most exciting, is the technological progress. We've had different kinds of levels of technological progress over the cycles that make up the crypto industry. Cycles, we always talk about the bear and the bull cycles. And really kind of the last bear market when folks were really declaring the space dead, as they do, by the way, every single cycle.
Yep.
If you go
It really felt. I remember
felt
when Ethereum was
the
touching
most,
$800 after
yeah.
the FTX crisis, and I was like, I don't know where the bottom is here. This feels
Yeah.
like the most toxic asset.
Oh my God.
And that was like, I
a
basically,
great time to start a fund, right?
Yeah.
well,
totally.
yeah.
Like,
No,
that's
and,
what I had just started our fund.
no, and,
Yeah.
and in hindsight, I was like, the moment that I thought this,
It was over.
it was completely over, was
was
like
the
a
beginning.
perfect bottom tick.
Perfect bottom.
Guys, another time, another story for another day. Remind me to tell you my Solana buying story in
Okay.
New Year's. And when I thought it couldn't go any lower, it even
Yeah.
went lower. Although we got in when it was pretty darn low. And
That's great.
and to
Yeah.
a lot of assets, you asked if we do liquids. Absolutely, we do. We believe
Sure.
hugely in tokens. We believe hugely in equity. But let me get back to the fundamentals first, because this is where we're spending our day. Thinking about stuff like the technological progress. If you think about post FTX, that era you're talking about, ETH is at or thereabouts. Solana got down to like what, $9. Bitcoin's hitting like 17, 16, $18,000 levels. People were declaring the space dead. Pundits. Sorry, I know you're not pundits, but everyone was saying, God, what a
yappers.
terrible idea. You started a crypto fund. And here we were, 10 of us, like, no, this is a great time in the space. And I think one of the things we saw is there's a market story to crypto and there's a technology story to crypto. And what we saw on the technical progress, and by the way, Fred Wilson and I authored a blog post probably about a week after FTX saying, hey, the technical story here has not changed, folks. And instead, it's only changing for the better. We had things like the Ethereum merge, the largest software upgrade in history. Totally, the founder of Solana recently said that we're no longer talking about block space for one of the first times in this industry.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff is scalable, stuff is cheaper. Instead of paying, multiple dollars for a stablecoin transfer or an NFT transaction, it's sub 1 cent. And that's due in large part to the builders that were building through these bear cycles, including the last painful bear cycle. So that's the second fundamental. And I think the third fundamental, as I think about it, is product market fit. You talk about things like product market fit, Bitcoin, hello, product market fit, Exhibit
Yep.
A. I debated Paul Krugman in, was it 2018 or 2017? And he told me Bitcoin has zero use. I debated him and I said it will find product market fit. At that time, I think Bitcoin was trading around $3,000, $4,000, $5,000.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, fast forward these years later, I think it's clear it has found product market fit as a digital store of value. But also we have things like stable coins have found clear product market fit. And I hope we can talk about stables. We'll dive deeper later in today's session because stable coins are the story of the day that folks in the mainstream are now talking about. So we have product market fit and other product market fit kind of, I would say we're on the precipice of. We can talk about that. But then you mentioned the fourth fundamental, which is regulatory. And I think the thing I heard for the last decade from builders, by the way, from enterprises, from institutions, from LPs when I was at my prior fund, is regulators aren't going to allow this though, right? Like this is all going to get shut down.
What was your answer then? Was it like the obvious rebuttal is regulators are going to make code illegal? Like it's pretty hard to ban code, right? Anybody can kind of create it and put it out on the internet. I'm sure you were always confident that it wouldn't be made illegal, but at the same time, the sort of U.S. regulatory regime was making it pretty difficult to exist as a crypto founder in the U.S., which had the same, sort of effect in some ways.
Yeah, fun fact, since there's the conference going on today, I don't know if you guys are aware of this. I was asked probably around 2012, 2013 to help shut down Bitcoin for the US government when I was a federal prosecutor.
Wow.
So it's just crazy to think
Shut it
about.
down.
I mean,
Hey, Katie, little project. I don't know if you have time this weekend to look
Can
into
you
it.
shut
Can you
it
shut
down?
down?
All of Bitcoin.
open the case, Fanu Lanu, first name unknown, last name unknown.
Wow.
Wow.
Somewhere in the Tenderloin, San Francisco 450 Golden Gate said file of Fanu Lanu. But look, I realized early on that this was a really powerful technology. And regulators, by the way, and we've been saying this for the last decade, regulators should love this technology. I mean, for its kind of permanence, right? All of the things that make a blockchain great for a lot of things. Also, by the way, look, as I always said when I was a criminal, I hoped that criminals would use this instead of cash or wires, which I don't know how many banks anyone has ever subpoenaed. I've subpoenaed a lot of them. Good luck getting compliance with a subpoena. But at the same time, I really do worry about the erosion of financial privacy, and not just now that I'm in the crypto industry 10 years later. I talked about this when I was a prosecutor and the kind of reach of the Bank Secrecy Act. And we can go really deep on that. I think there are parts now under the third party doctrine that if it went back to the Supreme Court today, I think you might have a very different result than the last time the Bank Secrecy Act was challenged was in the 1970s. And of course, the velocity of payments has just skyrocketed since then. And now, unlike in 1970, where I couldn't glean too much information about you from your maybe couple payments or people writing out checks back in those days, now, if you think about if I have all access to all of your payment information, I could probably like predict where you're going to go every day, just about, right? I mean, it's a really great almost in that way, and this is not crypto, this is just all financial data, right? Every time you use your Apple Pay, you're using a credit card, you're using stable coins. I mean, this is something that we should talk about at another time.
Talk about your kind of early stage investment framework, philosophy. I imagine there's investments that you get the opportunity to make that you believe will be successful, but maybe aren't the best use of your capital if you have this sort of broader vision of where the asset class can and the technology can go. But I'm curious how you think about opportunities and even kind of your moral framework for investments.
I've never heard it described as a moral framework, but that's an interesting framing. I mean, I think first of all, we start with the founders. Like any other venture investor, it's all about the founders and the market opportunity, right? And if you think about founders that I've previously kind of known in my gut, this is an amazing founder, an exceptional person who's going to build an amazing business. I mean, the first instance of that, as far as I was concerned, coming into crypto, was Brian Armstrong and Coinbase, right? And I think one of the things that makes Brian so remarkable is he had a huge business going, just spot trading Bitcoin and then Ethereum and adding all of these other assets. But he was never content to just rest on those laurels as an exchange. It was always about diversifying the business and the Web3 economy. And he was thinking about things like stable coins many, many years ago. Obviously, USDC was a partnership between Coinbase and
yeah, we had Balaji on earlier, and he showed a video of the launch, the web's page for the launch video, and he's like in the first 5 seconds
in that video.
I remember that. I remember that. Did he have a bowl of cereal with cream or something
I think
in
so,
that dating? I remember those days with Balaji well, with the USDC launch happening. And I think, again, I remember being in the Coinbase office, by the way, the day that Bitcoin first hit $10,000 for the first time. Imagine, by the way, if we were having this conversation, now we would be like, oh my God, $10,000 market correction. Well, just a few short years ago, that was like cause for celebration. People couldn't believe it was $10,000. I was in the office. The euphoria was kind of everywhere, except Brian had his eyes on what's happening next. We're not going to get comfortable with this. We're building an open global financial system for the world. Where are we taking our revenue lines next? And he's been thinking about that day the S1, day the direct listing happened in April of 2021 at Coinbase. So I was so excited to be a director of that company for almost 8 years and see that company through a remarkable series of events. And I'm so excited watching from the sidelines about what they're doing. So I think the first thing we look for an amazing, exceptional founder. And that, Brian's a great example, right? So we're just trying to find the next Brian's, but also the market opportunities and the space. As I said, the asset class is so broad. So we're talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about prediction markets. One thing, that's an area we're very excited about, but we kind of think about it as, where will this evolve? Not the current state of innovation, but more the end state of innovation, or the midpoint state of innovation. And in the case of prediction markets, I'll tell you, one of the things we think about is, think about like Netflix. Netflix was very centralized. It curated content. And then all of a sudden, YouTube came along and then unleashed even more content globally at scale. I mean, exceptionally so. So for prediction markets, when are we going to get that user-generated equivalent, or the YouTube moment? I think that's really interesting. And I think what makes crypto special in that story is the programmability that people around the world, 24/7, the internet operates 24/7, and anyone with a smartphone can access that. So we think that's exciting.
Yeah.
So we're looking for, exceptional founders.
Well, it sounds like an easy job. Just find 10 more Brian Armstrongs, and you're great. So
10 more.
Sounds like an easy
job.
job.
I believe it. I believe in you.
I think you can do it.
And thank you for doing the work to surface the Brians of the world.
Yeah, we're talking to him later today. We're very excited.
Oh, great. Well, I'll tune in for that also. I think, though, you mentioned moral. I think one of the things we've done...
The context there is like certain VCs will have traditional VCs will have a vice clause, right? Where they say, we don't do defense. We don't do recreational cannabis. We don't do this. And I could imagine crypto funds bifurcating to some degree, where some of them say, we're going to do these types of deals and we're not going to do those types of deals. But maybe that
happens already, right? You saw this during the last run-up, the last bull run. In 2021, we had many folks, traditional VCs, many of whom are friends of mine, decided they were going to get into crypto, but they weren't going to touch tokens. They were only going to do equity businesses. And although we love crypto equity businesses, they missed out on a lot of tremendous opportunities. Imagine if you had said, we're not touching Solana. I mean, Solana is a huge market opportunity. Ethereum, huge market opportunity. I mean, Bitcoin, huge market opportunity, right? These are just some blue chips I'm naming. Of course, there are plenty of others. We said, we are crypto maxis. We're not, we're not going to be religious zealots about any particular token, but nor are we going to write off entire segments. Rather, we're going to focus on the founder, the bona fides of the project, the metrics of the project. And we really want to know here, and by the way, do they have a plan for regulatory compliance, realizing that times were uncertain in those moments, but do they have a plan for it? or is there plan to launch a token? And then we say leave the U.S.
That's got to be the most nervous meeting a founder has in their round is pitching you on their regulatory plan, because like a lot of other VCs are like, yeah, great, he's got a regulatory plan. You're like, well, here's like the 10 reasons why that is not going to work.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that actually we like to think that we can be helpful in that way, even with clarity. I was talking to probably one of the most legendary biotech investors in the world a couple months ago, and he told a group of our founders, he said, I'm in a regulated space. We've got plenty of regulatory clarity. And believe me, we still need to kind of navigate. Like it doesn't just go away just because we have legislation passed, which we think is really important, and clarity. You still got to comply with it. And I always said, look, you got to have like kind of a plan for it. You don't have to have it all figured out when you're raising a seed round, when you're raising your Series A. Coinbase was great in this regard, but look, they've obviously made a lot of progress as a company on that front across the different iterations of their company, like one would expect, like is reasonable. So my touchstone is what's reasonable, and you got to build a business too, right? And I think we realize that, and we're pragmatic partners, and we like to work with founders. Tell me a founder who says, I have no idea what to do here. I don't want to break the law. I don't know what the law is. But like, we'd love your help. We'd love your thought partnership. And we love those kind of founders.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. This was a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, come back on again
Thank you
soon.
guys. Thank you for having me.
We'd love to go way deeper. I'm sure we'll learn a lot today. This is good.
Okay. Sounds good.
Talk to you
Cheers.
soon.
Thanks
Bye.
for coming on.